I am a cis man who had gender-affirming surgery. I had a condition called gynecomastia, or abnormal development of breast tissue in a male. For years, this meant I had nicknames including Nips, Nipples, Tits, Titty Tomlin, Ben Tits, Ben Nips, and some more. I honestly don't think many of the people who use these names intended to hurt me. It is common for men to bond with this sort of talk, but it did make me feel worse about my body, and did sometimes make me feel like my body was inadequately masculine. Eventually, my parents helped me find a plastic surgeon, and the plastic surgeon was able to do a straightforward breast reduction procedure. It was a several-month recovery, but afterwards I did have much smaller breasts. There's very little difference, except perhaps in the techniques the surgeon decides to use because of the extent of the procedure, between my surgery and the top surgery a trans man might get. However, in many jurisdictions, bigots want to ban this simple and reasonably safe procedure for the trans man, but not for me. This is obviously fundamentally absurd. By what realistic justification can you say that one group of men can get this plastic surgery, but another group of men cannot? Or consider a female who decides she is unhappy with the current appearance of her breasts and seeks out a breast augmentation. That procedure will again be incredibly simple to a trans woman who seeks out a breast augmentation, but the bigots are only interested in banning one of those. Clearly, the danger of the procedure itself is not the differentiator here. So what is the justification? The way it is justified is by being so embedded in the patriarchy in America that you must use state violence to enforce a very narrow depiction of gender. And if you are okay with using state violence to enforce a narrow depiction of gender, you are an authoritarian, you are a bigot, you are probably a fascist. We cannot sacrifice trans folks to the fascists because that will not stop them. They will seek out other ways to control folks, especially females. They will limit the control these women have over their own bodies by banning abortion. They will limit their ability to freely move through the country, often using the anti-abortion laws as the pretext. They will try to limit women's participation in the workplace, falsely claiming that the women are only in the workplace because of woke, or diversity, or DEI. They will try to make it so that victims of sexual harassment or sexual assault are not believed and cannot seek any realistic recourse against their abusers and rapists. They will try to limit women's participation in democracy, finding ways to limit their ability to vote, or, like Peter Thiel, just explicitly arguing that women should not be allowed to vote. You might also note that most of these things are already happening and are likely to accelerate. Yet, despite that fact, many in the so-called opposition party have been perfectly willing to support the patriarchy and its arbitrary conception of gender, believing somehow that sacrificing trans folks on the altar of gender essentialism will lead to election victories that will stop the advance of the fascists. And yet, in doing so, they sacrifice a massive portion over the debate about how the world and society should be to the fascists and enable the fascists to accelerate their other policies. By failing to resist this narrow conception of gender, they inherently enforce the patriarchal systems that you cannot separate from the history of America. The reason I am talking about my own gender-affirming care today is because it's not controversial. Elon Musk's hair plugs, not controversial. Jeff Bezos' stack of medications that supported his physical transformation, not controversial. Which leads us to the obvious conclusion that trans folks seeking out gender-affirming care should also not be controversial. Trans people are real. Trans people should have autonomy over their own bodies, and these threats of state violence must be condemned loudly and frequently.